Blood was everywhere, but it was the whispered phrase that truly froze rookie ER nurse Harley Hastings. A dying, unidentified trauma patient gripped her wrist and breathed a sequence of words that shouldn't exist outside classified military black sites. Instinctively, Harley gave the counter-response. Then, the real nightmare began. The chaotic rhythm of the Friday night graveyard shift at St. Vincent's Trauma Center in Los Angeles was something 24-year-old Harley Hastings was just starting to get used to. She had been off orientation for exactly 3 weeks. She could handle the drunken frat boys, the multi-car pileups off the 405 freeway, and the occasional gang-related gunshot wound. But nothing in her grueling nursing rotations could have prepared her for the man they called John Doe. The double doors of Trauma Bay 1 flew open with a violent crash. Paramedics rushed in, drenched in rain and sweat, pushing a gurney that left a thick, crimson trail on the sterile linoleum floor. "John Doe, mid-30s," yelled paramedic David Rossi over the din of medical monitors. Multiple GSWs to the torso and left thigh. Found dumped in an alleyway near San Pedro. Blood pressure is tanking 70/40. Heart rate is 140. We pushed 2 liters of saline, but he's bleeding out faster than we can fill him. Dr. Thomas Aris, the attending trauma surgeon, was already snapping on his gloves. "Let's go, people. Transfer on 3. 1, 2, 3. Harley helped heave the heavy, muscular frame onto the trauma bed. The man was a mess of shredded tactical clothing. This wasn't standard streetwear. It was reinforced ripstop fabric, soaked through. As Harley grabbed the trauma shears to cut away his shirt, she noticed the faint outline of military tattoos on his forearms, obscured by dirt and blood. "Get him on the monitors, Harley. I need 2 large-bore IVs, stat. Call the blood bank and tell them we need the massive transfusion protocol right now, doctor." Aris commanded, his hands pressing down on a deep wound in the patient's abdomen to staunch the arterial spray. Harley's hands shook slightly, but her training took over. She secured the IVs, watching as the dark, life-saving O-negative blood began to flow into the stranger's veins. As she leaned over him to adjust the oxygen mask, his eyes suddenly snapped open. They were ice blue and startlingly lucid, completely contrasting the dying state of his body. He wasn't looking at the blinding overhead surgical lights. He was looking directly at Harley. His massive, blood-slicked hand shot out, wrapping around her wrist with a grip like a steel vise. Dr. Aris didn't notice he was busy shouting orders at the anesthesiologist at the head of the bed. The man pulled Harley down by a fraction of an inch. His lips moved, struggling against the oxygen mask. Harley instinctively leaned in, thinking he was trying to tell her about an allergy or a secondary injury. Instead, a ragged, barely audible whisper slipped past his lips. "Echo. Trident. Midnight. Protocol. Olympus has fallen to the wolves." Harley froze. The sounds of the trauma bay, the screaming alarms, the sharp commands of the doctors, the clatter of surgical instruments, all vanished into a vacuum of dead silence. All the blood drained from her face. Echo. Trident. Midnight. Protocol. It was a string of words she hadn't heard in 10 years. A string of words burned into her memory by a man who was supposed to be dead. Her father, Captain Arthur Hastings, had been a JSOC operator. When she was a teenager, before his final classified deployment to Syria, from which he never returned, he used to make her memorize a specific counterphrase. "If anyone ever comes to you, Harley, and says those words," her father had told her in the dim light of their living room, his face etched with a terrifying seriousness, "it means my team has been compromised by our own people. It means you are in danger, and it means the person speaking to you is the only one who can protect you." She thought it was paranoia, a byproduct of PTSD. But here, 10 years later, a dying stranger in a civilian hospital was speaking the exact distress code of her father's ghost unit. The stranger's grip on her wrist tightened, his icy blue eyes pleading, desperate for the connection. His heart rate monitor began to screech a high-pitched warning. He was slipping into ventricular tachycardia. Harley swallowed the lump in her throat, leaned down so her lips were hovering just above his ear, and whispered the phrase she had kept locked away for a decade. "The wolves hunt, but the shepherd stands watch." The commando's eyes widened in shock, then immediately softened with profound relief. He had found the needle in the haystack. With the last ounce of his remaining strength, He reached toward the waistline of his shredded tactical pants, his fingers brushing against a hidden, waterproof seam. Lining, he choked out, blood bubbling at the corner of his mouth. The drive. Don't let the suits take it. Trust no one. His eyes rolled back, and the monitor flatlined. He's crashing! V-fib! Shouted the anesthesiologist. Paddles! Charge to 200! Dr. Eris roared. Harley, step back! Harley practically stumbled backward as the team shocked the patient's heart. Once, twice. On the third shock, a shaky but steady rhythm returned to the monitor. He was alive, but barely. Let's get him to the OR now, Dr. Eris ordered, helping wheel the heavy bed out of the bay. Harley was left standing alone in the blood-splattered room, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She looked down at the pile of the man's ruined clothes discarded in the corner. The lining. Moving quickly, she knelt beside the biohazard bin. She grabbed the heavy tactical pants, her fingers desperately searching the blood-soaked fabric. There, at the waistband, a tiny concealed zipper. She pulled it open and her fingers brushed against cold, hard metal. She pulled out a small, heavy titanium flash drive, no bigger than a stick of gum. It was engraved with a single symbol, a trident wrapped in barbed wire. Her father's unit insignia. Harley slipped the cold metal drive into the deep pocket of her scrubs, just as the doors to the trauma bay blew open again. Nobody moves! Hands where I can see them! Harley gasped, spinning around. 3 men in immaculate dark charcoal suits stormed into the bloodied trauma bay, holding up federal badges. Their eyes were cold, calculating, and sweeping the room like predators. They weren't local PD. They didn't have the exhausted, overworked look of LAPD detectives. These men were federal, and they radiated immediate danger. The leader of the group, a tall man with a sharp jawline and lifeless gray eyes, stepped forward. He looked at the empty spot where the gurney had been, then zeroed his gaze on Harley, who was still standing near the discarded clothes. "Where is he?" the man demanded, his voice a low, dangerous rumble that cut right through the residual chaos of the ER. "Where is who?" Harley managed to ask, desperately trying to keep her voice steady while her hand subconsciously hovered over the pocket containing the flash drive. The gunshot victim. 6'2", tactical gear, multiple wounds. "Brought in 5 minutes ago," the man said, advancing toward her. "I am Special Agent Caldwell, Department of Homeland Security. You are harboring a Class A domestic terrorist, and I need to know where he is right now." "Terrorist!" The word rang in Harley's ears. She knew the code. She knew her father. Whoever the bleeding man was, he was no terrorist. But Caldwell's gun was visible under his suit jacket, and his eyes promised violence. Before Harley could answer, the ER charge nurse, a seasoned veteran named Brenda, marched into the bay with her hands on her hips. "Excuse me, gentlemen, but you cannot storm into my trauma center yelling like that. This is a sterile environment. This is a federal crime scene, ma'am," Caldwell snapped, flashing his badge right in Brenda's face. "The hospital is officially on lockdown. No one in, no one out. Now, I will ask one more time. Where is the fugitive?" "If you're talking about the John Doe, Dr. Eris just took him up to surgery on the 3rd floor, Brenda said, unfazed by the badge. "He's currently having his chest cracked open, so you're going to have to wait in the lobby like everyone else." Caldwell didn't say a word. He just tapped an earpiece hidden in his ear. "Target is on the 3rd floor. Active OR. Secure the exits. Nobody gets near that operating room without my say-so." He gestured to his 2 men, who immediately sprinted out of the bay toward the elevators. Caldwell lingered for a moment, his gray eyes locking onto Harley. He noticed her blood-stained scrubs, her pale face, and the way she was standing just a little too stiffly next to the biohazard bin. "You were the attending nurse?" Caldwell asked, stepping dangerously close to her. He smelled like expensive cologne and ozone. "Yes," Harley said, forcing herself to meet his gaze. "I helped stabilize him. Did he say anything to you?" Caldwell asked, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Before he went under? A man in his condition. Sometimes they hallucinate, say things, pass things along." Harley's heart was beating so hard she felt physically sick. She thought about her father's empty casket. She thought about the tears her mother had cried when the military officials handed them a folded flag and a hollow story about a helicopter crash in a training exercise. He was unconscious the entire time. "Agent Caldwell," Harley lied, her voice deadpan and professional. He lost over 3 liters of blood before he even hit the doors. He was in hypovolemic shock. He didn't say a word. Caldwell stared at her for a long, agonizing moment. He was searching for a tell, a twitch, a drop of sweat. Harley held her ground, channeling every ounce of clinical detachment she had learned in nursing school. "We are confiscating his personal effects," Caldwell finally said, gesturing to the bloody clothes in the bin. "Bag them up." Harley numbly picked up a red plastic biohazard bag and shoved the ruined tactical gear inside, praying Caldwell wouldn't notice the tiny, unzipped compartment at the waistband. She sealed the bag and handed it over. "Don't leave the hospital, nurse," Caldwell said, taking the bag. "We will be conducting formal interviews with all staff shortly." He turned on his heel and walked out, the doors swinging shut behind him. Harley collapsed against the stainless steel counter, letting out a shaky breath she felt she had been holding for an hour. Her hand slipped into her pocket, her fingers wrapping around the cold titanium of the drive. She was in completely over her head. A wounded Black Ops commando, a compromised federal agency, a hospital lockdown, and a piece of intelligence that people were clearly willing to kill for. She needed to know what was on the drive. More importantly, she needed to make sure the man upstairs in the OR survived long enough to tell her what to do next. Because if Caldwell realized the drive was missing, she wouldn't just lose her nursing license, she would lose her life. Glancing at the wall clock, Harley wiped the sweat from her forehead. It was 3:15 a.m. The hospital was surrounded. She had to get to a computer that wasn't connected to the hospital's main intranet, and she had to do it before Caldwell's men started tearing the place apart. She took a deep breath, straightened her scrub top, and walked out of the trauma bay, stepping directly into the crosshairs of a deadly conspiracy. The fluorescent lights of the hospital corridors buzzed with a sickly, yellow hum. Harley kept her head down, her rubber-soled nursing clogs squeaking softly against the freshly waxed linoleum. Her destination was the sub-basement, a labyrinth of old medical records, boiler rooms, and the hospital's archaic server racks. It was the only place in Street. Vincent's with standalone computer terminals that weren't actively monitored by the main IT desk. Computers used strictly for digitizing paper files from the 90s. She swiped her ID badge at the stairwell door, praying Caldwell hadn't already locked down the hospital's internal security system. The light blinked green. She slipped inside, the heavy metal door clicking shut behind her, plunging the stairwell into dim, motion sensor lighting. Her lungs burned as she descended 3 flights of concrete stairs in a dead sprint. The titanium flash drive in her pocket felt like a lead weight. At the bottom landing, she cracked the door open and peered into the sub-basement. It smelled of bleach, damp concrete, and old paper. The hallway was empty. Harley slipped out and hurried past rows of caged storage units until she reached the door marked Archives and Digitization. She locked the deadbolt behind her and scrambled to the back of the dusty room, finding an old desktop computer resting on a metal cart. She hit the power button. The machine whirred to life, the cooling fan rattling like a dying breath. Her hands trembled as she pulled the tiny titanium drive from her scrub pocket. She stared at the barbed wire trident engraved on the metal. "Dad, what did you get mixed up in?" Taking a deep, jagged breath, she plugged the drive into the USB port. The screen flickered. A prompt appeared, bypassing the standard Windows operating system entirely. The screen went pitch black, displaying a single, blinking green cursor, followed by a text field. Restricted access. Department of Defense. Enter clearance code. Harley stared at the screen. She didn't have a military clearance code. She was an ER nurse. Panic began to claw at her throat. If she entered the wrong password, would it wipe the drive? Would it alert Caldwell? The wolves hunt, but the shepherd stands watch. The commando's words echoed in her mind. Her father's words. Her fingers hovered over the dusty keyboard. She typed out the word SHEPHERD. She hit enter. Access denied. 2 attempts remaining. "Damn it!" Harley hissed under her breath. She raked a hand through her hair, trying to think. Her father hadn't just given her a phrase. He had given her a methodology. He always used to tell her that security wasn't about the hardest word to guess, but the one you never forget. She thought about the day he left for Syria. August 14th. She typed 0814. Enter. Access denied. Final attempt. Warning, drive will purge upon failure. Tears pricked the corners of Harley's eyes. She had one shot left to uncover whatever was worth a man bleeding to death in her trauma bay. She closed her eyes, visualizing her father's face, the serious set of his jaw when he made her memorize the protocol. Echo, Trident, Midnight, Protocol. Wait, not the phrase. The man upstairs had said something else before he passed out. Olympus has fallen to the wolves. Her father's ghost unit was called Trident. But what was Olympus? Harley's eyes snapped open. She quickly typed the word Olympus. The computer hesitated. The fan whirred louder. Then, the screen flashed green. Access granted. Welcome. Operator. A series of folders materialized on the screen. Harley opened the first one, labeled Target Acquisition. Her eyes scanned the documents, her blood running colder with every sentence she read. It was a manifesto of treason. The files detailed a rogue syndicate operating within the Department of Homeland Security and the CIA, a shadow faction calling themselves the Wolves. They were using classified military intelligence to systematically assassinate embedded American operatives overseas, selling their identities to foreign cartels and hostile intelligence agencies in exchange for untraceable offshore funding. Caldwell wasn't hunting a terrorist. Caldwell was the terrorist. Harley clicked on a subfolder titled Operation Trident, cleared from the board. A list of names loaded on the screen. There were 12 of them. 11 of the names had a red X stamped next to them, along with dates of death stretching back over the last decade. Her breath hitched in her throat. The third name on the list was Captain Arthur Hastings. Beside his name was the date he supposedly died in a training helicopter crash. They murdered him, Harley whispered, a hot tear slipping down her cheek. They murdered all of them. The 12th name on the list was John Locke, alias Griffin. The status next to his name read, Active, Hunt, and Terminate. Griffin was the man bleeding out on the 3rd floor. He was the last surviving member of her father's unit, the only one who had managed to compile the evidence of Caldwell's treason. And now, Caldwell was in the hospital, sealing the exits, moving in for the kill. A sharp, metallic clatter echoed from the hallway outside the archive room. Harley froze. She minimized the folders and listened. Heavy, deliberate footsteps were approaching the door. It wasn't the shuffling gait of a night shift janitor. It was the measured, tactical tread of someone hunting. Target is likely seeking a terminal, a muffled voice spoke through the door, the cadence flat and professional. Check the archive rooms. If she's there, secure the asset and eliminate the nurse. Harley's heart hammered a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She couldn't fight a trained federal killer, but she couldn't let them destroy the evidence either. She needed to get this information to someone who could stop Caldwell. She frantically scanned the archive room. Sitting on a desk nearby was a heavy, industrial fax machine used for transmitting medical records to insurance companies. It was connected directly to a dedicated, hardwired phone line, completely separate from the hospital's internet network, which Caldwell had undoubtedly shut down. She dragged the encrypted PDF files from the flash drive onto the desktop, hit print, and prayed the old laser printer had ink. The machine groaned, spitting out page after page of damning evidence. As the pages stacked up, the doorknob to the archive room rattled. Locked, the voice outside said, "Stand back! I'm breaching." Harley grabbed the stack of papers, her hands shaking violently. Who could she send it to? The local police would be intercepted by DHS. She needed a federal or military contact. She remembered a name her mother kept in an old address book, a man who had delivered her father's eulogy, General David Clayton, Pentagon Joint Chiefs. She snatched the hospital directory off the wall, flipping to the emergency federal contacts page used for mass casualty events. There, under the Department of Defense, was a direct fax line to the Pentagon's domestic operations desk. She punched the number into the fax machine, shoved the thick stack of papers into the feeder, and hit send. BP. The machine dialed out. The slow, agonizing screech of a fax connection filled the room. Crack. The heavy wooden door splintered as a boot slammed into it. Harley yanked the titanium drive from the computer, grabbed a heavy metal hole punch from the desk, and pressed herself flat against the wall behind the door. Crack. The door frame gave way. A man in a charcoal suit burst into the room, a suppressed pistol leading the way. He swept the room, his eyes locking onto the glowing computer screen and the humming fax machine. He didn't check his corners. Harley swung the heavy metal hole punch with everything she had, slamming it directly into the side of the agent's head. The man grunted, his knees buckling as he crashed into the filing cabinets, his gun clattering to the floor. Harley didn't wait to see if he was unconscious. She sprinted out of the archive room, leaving the fax machine to finish its slow, agonizing transmission, and bolted toward the stairs. She had to get to the third floor. She had to protect Griffin. The third-floor surgical wing was suffocatingly silent. The usual frantic energy of nurses, orderlies, and anesthesiologists had evaporated, replaced by the heavy dread of the lockdown. Empty gurneys formed a haphazard barricade in front of the double doors leading to the operating rooms. Creeping down the sterile hallway, Harley kept to the shadows. Her scrubs clung to her skin, damp with cold sweat. Through the narrow glass window of OR3, she could see Dr. Aris and a skeleton crew working desperately over Griffin's open chest. The heart monitor beeped in a steady, reassuring rhythm. He was holding on. But standing directly outside those doors, pacing like a caged predator, was Special Agent Caldwell. His charcoal suit jacket was pushed back, revealing a heavy shoulder holster. He checked his watch, his jaw tightly clenched. "Where are my men?" Caldwell hissed into his earpiece, the sound carrying in the quiet corridor. "Report in." Silence. "I said report in," Caldwell snapped. He ripped the earpiece out in disgust. Crouched behind a massive mobile crash cart, Harley's mind raced. She couldn't fight Caldwell physically. He was a trained federal killer, but this was her hospital. She knew the geography, the emergency protocols, and how to weaponize her environment. Beside her, a red, glass-covered box caught her eye, the central fire alarm pull station. Next to it hung the hospital's internal PA intercom phone, used for paging doctors and calling code blues. A desperate plan formed. Harley unhooked the intercom phone, quickly dialed the override code for the surgical wing, and left the receiver dangling off its hook. The line was now live. Every word spoken in this hallway would broadcast through the overhead speakers in the OR, the waiting rooms, and the nurses' stations. Taking a shaky breath, she stepped out from behind the crash cart. "Looking for this, Caldwell?" Harley called out. Her voice echoed sharply down the polished linoleum. She held up the titanium flash drive, letting the metal catch the harsh fluorescent light. Caldwell spun around, his hand instinctively dropping to his weapon. His cold gray eyes narrowed as they locked onto the drive. A slow, terrifying smile crept across his face. "Well, well, the brave little nurse," Caldwell said, his voice a low rumble. He took a measured step toward her. "I underestimated you. I thought you were just collateral damage. But you actually found his little insurance policy." "I know what's on it," Harley said. She forced her shoulders back, refusing to let him see her knees trembling. "I know all about Project Olympus. I know you've been selling out American operatives for 10 years to the highest bidder. And I know you killed my father, Captain Arthur Hastings." Caldwell stopped his approach. Genuine surprise flickered across his face, quickly replaced by a dark, cruel laugh. "Arthur Hastings. You're Artie's kid?" Caldwell shook his head, drawing his pistol and pointing it directly at her chest. "Talk about bad luck. Your old man was a patriot, Harley. Stubborn to a fault. He figured out our supply lines in Damascus. Gave us no choice but to drop his chopper. He screamed the whole way down." The cruelty of his words hit Harley like a physical strike, but she held her ground. Above them, the PA system quietly hummed, broadcasting his full confession to the surgical team locked inside OR3. "You're a traitor," Harley spat. "I'm a pragmatist," Caldwell corrected, closing the distance. "The world runs on leverage and capital. Now, be a smart girl and slide that drive across the floor. Do that, and I might let you walk out of here." "You're not letting anyone walk out," Harley countered, a fierce fire igniting in her chest. "You're going to kill the man in that OR, and then you'll kill me to cover your tracks." "True," Caldwell admitted, thumbing back the hammer of his pistol. "But if you hand it over, I'll make it quick." "You're too late," Harley said. "I already transmitted the files. A hardline medical fax to General David Clayton at the Pentagon. The Joint Chiefs have your manifesto, Caldwell. They have the kill list. They have everything." Caldwell's confident facade shattered. The color drained from his face. "You're lying. The network is down." "It's an analog line, you arrogant son of a bitch," Harley said. "You forgot to cut the phone cords." Caldwell roared in fury, raising his gun to fire. At that exact second, Harley smashed her elbow into the glass of the fire alarm and yanked the lever. The hallway erupted into absolute chaos. Deafening sirens screamed from the ceiling. Blinding strobe lights flashed in all directions. The magnetic locks on the heavy steel fire doors at both ends of the hallway disengaged, slamming shut with a thunderous crash, sealing them in the corridor. Caldwell stumbled backward, blinded and deafened, his shot going wide and shattering a light fixture above Harley's head. She didn't hesitate. Harley grabbed the heavy mobile crash cart and shoved it forward with all her weight. The metal cart, loaded with defibrillators and oxygen tanks, slammed into Caldwell's knees. He crashed to the floor, his gun skittering away. Before he could recover, the heavy steel doors at the far end of the hallway blew open with explosive force. FBI hostage rescue! Drop your weapons! On the ground! A dozen heavily armed tactical agents swarmed the corridor, laser sights tracking directly onto Caldwell's chest. The hospital had been breached. The cavalry had arrived. Caldwell looked at the laser sights, then at Harley, pure venom in his eyes. Slowly, he raised his hands. Harley sank against the wall, sliding down to the floor. She clutched the titanium drive tightly as the sirens wailed, feeling a profound peace. Her father's ghost could finally rest. 4 days later, morning sunlight streamed into the intensive care unit. The hospital was quiet again. Harley stood at the foot of Griffin's bed, adjusting a fresh IV bag. He looked different, pale and heavily bandaged, but breathing on his own. The wolves had been dismantled. Caldwell was in federal custody. Project Olympus was headline news worldwide. Griffin slowly opened his ice-blue eyes. He blinked against the light, his gaze landing on Harley. "You didn't run," Griffin rasped, his voice rough. Harley smiled gently. "I'm a nurse, Griffin. We don't run from emergencies." Griffin shook his head, his eyes softening with deep respect. "No, you're a shepherd. Your father would be damn proud." Harley let a warm tear fall, nodding silently. She stepped back into the quiet hospital, finally ready for her next shift. If you were captivated by Harley's relentless courage and this intense, high-stakes medical thriller, make sure you hit that like button. Don't forget to share this incredible, real-life-inspired dramatic story with your friends who love suspense, tactical twists, and institutional justice. Subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you never miss out on our thrilling, long-form storytelling videos. Drop a comment below. Would you have known what to do with the classified code?
Hi, my name is Tran Than, the owner and manager of Noble Tales. After watching the video, the wounded commando spoke a classified code. The rookie nurse answered. I'd really like to know what you think. How did this story make you feel? What stayed with me most was the mix of courage and trust throughout the story. Harley was placed in a situation she never expected, yet she stayed calm enough to make difficult decisions when everything around her was falling apart. That sense of responsibility really stood out to me. One lesson I took from this story is that sometimes the right choice isn't the easiest one, especially when there's uncertainty and pressure involved. What was the moment that grabbed your attention the most? And do you think you would have trusted your instincts the way Harley did? If this story meant something to you, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. And if you enjoy stories like this, feel free to like the video or subscribe to Noble Tales for more.